The 1958 Dockum sit-in carries the legacy of being the first successful student-led sit-in in the United States. In response to the discrimination and segregation faced by African Americans on a daily basis, Ron Walters and Carol Parks, president and vice president of the local NAACP youth chapter, led and organized a group of teenagers to peacefully protest at the downtown Dockum drugstore.
We decided to visit Dockums on Saturday mornings and on Thursday evenings. Now, I never did go down on Thursday evenings. And the reason why I chose Thursday evenings is because the stores were open late on Thursday night. And Dockums would have had heavy traffic, foot traffic, you know. People would want to go in and have a Coke while they're waiting for the bus or whatever. I never did go down on Thursday night. I did participate on Saturdays. One of the Catholic churches, the Catholic church in terms of being in the black community, St. Peter Claver, the building still stands on Indiana 1100 block, permitted us to do some role playing and develop a strategy. We were determined to follow the precepts of Dr. Martin Luther King.
The actual planning of this event, our youth chapter of the NAACP, the president was Ronnie Walters. And the president of the Wichita chapter, Chester Lewis, Ronnie went to him and asked him about doing a sit-in, that he had read or something about a sit-in. And so Chester Lewis told him, well, let me check with the National. Well, that time was not a good time for African American youth. So he said, no. Well, Ronnie, he decided, well, we're going to do it anyway. So he got all these plans, and we practiced how we should act, how we should dress, and that when we are sitting there at the counter, what our mannerism should be. We should not be holding a conversation. We should not be reading. We shouldn't be chewing gum or anything of this sort. So when it was about your time, there was a schedule. When it was about your time, they would say, okay. So by the time that you would walk from, it was a cafeteria, and the name of it was the Forum. And it was on Market. So we would walk from there, that block, to Dockums. And then if there was empty seats, we took them. If there weren't, we'd wait till empty seats. Or it was time for those who were already there to get up and let us have their seat. So when I got off from work, I went to the farm where my other friends were, and then they told me what time that I was to sit at the counter. We never heard of it. At that time, Boeing was in the process of getting a huge government contract, and they wanted no problems at all. So there was no newspaper, nothing was, so it really wasn't ever written up. There was an African American paper, and I think there's only one picture. And you find nothing, and I mean, it's just hard to find. Now, Dr. Gretchen Ike, she researched, and this is how they come to find out that Joan Smith was one of the sit-ins. Because other than that, I never thought of it. For 48 some years, I never thought of it at all. I knew the results of it, that we only sit for 2 weeks, and that we were successful in our sit-in, and that Dockums was a subsidiary of Rexall. So once we were successful, I knew that part. But after that, we all scattered and went our separate ways, and 48 years. 48 years it was when it was brought back to my attention. History's not being real fair to the very first successful nonviolent sit-in happened here in Wichita in August of 1958. Now, they've given it to the Greenboro boys, and that's fine that they recognize them, but they were not first. We were first. Then shortly after we did it, Oklahoma City did it. but we were first, and we were so successful that Rexall, they opened up their counters to African Americans all across the nation.
Well, there was quite a few meetings that were held. I know they did a lot of scouting for others to participate because it's going to be a lengthy process. And I know I was recruited from North High School, and that's how I really got involved. And I knew all the kids who were participating in it, and so therefore we all knew what was going on, and so therefore we just wanted to be a part of it too, and to show our support. And so the process was that we were to go when they told us to go and do what they asked us to do, and we were to follow certain rules because it was pretty dangerous at the time. If anyone did something out of line, who knows what might have happened. So you had to really directly follow their rules and process that had been put in place for us. Well, Dr. Ronald Walters is what he became a doctor, had got his PhD, and he was a very bright young guy, and he had such charisma that many of us just loved him as a young person. And we listened to him because we knew that he was for what was right, and he was working with attorney Chester Lewis as well in the NAACP, and Chester Lewis was a great leader for the African American community. And so therefore we really trusted their judgment and knowledge and skill in working with us and leading us through this important time. And so Ronald Walters was the epitome of a great young man. The legacy goes on, as you can see right now. Here it is 50 years later. Who would have ever thought that something that we did as young people 50 years ago, when you can't remember yesterday, let alone 50 years ago, what you did with your life. But it's good we made good choices back then even, and something that we did that was very positive has made a difference throughout the United States of America, actually. And we were part of a very great movement of which we were not even aware would make such an impact on Wichita or the whole United States of America and the African American community. And I'm very proud to have been a part, just having a little part in it, although I was very young and very naive and didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't realize the impact that those movements and steps would make. And I'm very proud to say that I was a part of the Dockum drugstore sit-in.
The Dockum sit-in, as significant as it was, faced an almost complete media blackout at the time. It was covered only by small newspapers, and even then, the articles were few and far between. This, combined with the national NAACP's refusal to recognize the significance of the sit-in until almost a half-century later in 2006, keeps this historical event in almost utter obscurity. All that stands to memorialize those who struggled against the racial turbulence of the time is an unmarked statue half a block away from where the Dockum drugstore once stood. The events at Dockum also set into motion a second sit-in, led by students in Oklahoma City. On August 19, 1958, members of the Oklahoma City branch of the NAACP Youth Council, who Ron Walters had met with previously, initiated their own student-led sit-ins. On the heels of these two sit-ins came the more well-known Greensboro, North Carolina sit-ins. On the 1st of February 1960, Greensboro students orchestrated notably similar sit-ins. If not for the determination and nerve of Dockum sit-in participants, these societal-shaping events would not have been much more than a notion. It is important as time passes and memory of such events fades, that we remember the legacy of the students who had the audacity to stand against such unjust laws and practices.